Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life.
Hey, welcome back. Another exciting episode of Next to Madison. I am your host, Madison Malloy. This is episode 179. On this episode, we are covering cybersecurity. We all know what cybersecurity is, obviously the importance of it with more, basically everything being online now. It's important that your companies and your personal computers are protected to prevent from scammers and hackers and keeping your information safe. But this company that we're actually talking to today does cybersecurity for LOT devices, which stands for Internet of Things, which are your smaller devices. So people probably don't think much about that, so to say, but this is a very critical issue as more of these are popping up, especially kind of in the Web3 space as well. So we're going to get more into that. Obviously, I need to be more educated in cybersecurity side of the LOT devices. So I'm excited to jump into it. So we'll be right back after this brief announcement with our guest on this episode of Next to Madison.
Hey, it's Madison Malloy. I'm excited to announce that my new book, Time to Lighten the Fuck Up, is now available online and in stores. You can pick up your copy today by going to Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. This new book is a humorous self-help guide to help you remove the obstacles that are holding you back so you can take things less seriously and live a more enjoyable life. I'm so excited for you to read it. Now back to the show.
Welcome back. We are with our guest of the hour on this episode of Next to Madison. I'd like to welcome Brian Contos from Phosphorus. He's the Chief Security Officer. Welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So I just want to talk about, obviously, everybody kind of knows what cybersecurity is and why it's important and everything's going online. And then there's all these hacks and scams. And so I feel like it's kind of heightened everybody's awareness of cybersecurity, even though they don't work in IT. So I want you to first tell us about Phosphorus and what you guys do and why you're important.
Yeah, so Phosphorus is an IoT cybersecurity company, and IoT stands for Internet of Things. And these are essentially purpose-built devices with embedded firmware that have a finite number of uses. So that's a fancy way of saying I'm a printer, I'm a voice over IP phone, I'm a security camera, as opposed to a general purpose laptop or server or something like that. Now, there's a few categories within IoT. We actually call it XIoT or extended IoT. So those are all the things I just mentioned. And on the consumer side, you can think of Ring doorbells, Roomba vacuum cleaners, LG washer and dryers, and about a million other things. Then there's all the enterprise pieces that you might find in a large business, a bank, the government, so on and so forth. Then there's the OT, or operational technology, or some people call SCADA. And these are industrial control systems that control pipelines and power and energy generation, pharmaceuticals and manufacturing. And then there's all the network devices that sort of connect these things together. Collectively, we call this XIoT. And the thing that makes it special is, unlike your laptop or a server or a desktop computer, you can't put endpoint security on there. So while they're running usually the same operating systems and they have the same power and capability as your laptop, for example, they don't have the same level of security. So that's opened up a big sort of gap for bad guys to get in. Now, Phosphorus, we've been around for a little over 5 years. We were in stealth mode for many years, kind of building a technology that could go out there and help organizations discover all these devices. Because first of all, most organizations don't even know what they have. So discover those devices and then remediate the risk, things like managing the passwords, updating the patches and firmware, and then monitoring those devices to make sure they're secure. So essentially, we're doing for XIoT kind of what the security industry has been doing for traditional IT for the last couple of decades.
Yeah, which is and it's so needed because everything's going to the internet. Everything's like a smart device now. And people don't realize, I mean, I don't have one, but my parents do. They have the Alexa, which a lot of people do. And I'm like, I would never put that in my house. But the thing is, your phone's listening to you. You know, you have a conversation with a friend and then you pull up an account and all of a sudden you got an ad for the product you were just talking about. I mean, it is just beyond Big Brother.
And what's amazing about it is it is beyond Big Brother in many cases, because actually, when you think about healthcare devices, there's a lot of things that go inside your body now that are actually
And
connected.
look at this shit I got on my wrist. This little,
Yeah.
and all I want it for, the only thing I need this thing for, I don't care about all the other technology. I want to know how
Yeah.
many calories I'm burning, how many steps I took, and how many calories I burned during a specific workout. That's all I want it for.
With the added benefit that now you're also tracked 24/7.
I
You know,
know.
it's crazy. It's crazy. One of the most popular devices on the consumer side are baby monitors. So there are a lot of people have these monitors that do audio, video, or some combination
Yeah.
of the two. Um, and because they're so common, one of the most hacked devices out there are baby monitors. In fact, I won't call it the brand, but one of the most common forms of security cameras that also they also make baby monitors, that was on Amazon. It was like the number one choice, customer reviewed this and that. It actually shipped with malware already installed on it. So you don't have to worry about getting hacked. It came out of the package with malware on it. And what did that malware do? So it allowed nefarious actors in other locations in the country, or perhaps other countries in general, to spy on you. They could listen to conversations, they could see the video. And when you said shut off video, for example, or shut off audio, it just turns the green light to red. It's still recording, it's still sending everything out. You just changed the color of the light. So that's a very, very simple example. We're seeing much more grievous examples on the enterprise side and the government side, but it just goes to show you something as innocuous as, hey, I just ordered a baby monitor, I set it up, and now maybe a bad guy is taking advantage of that.
I mean, so what type of information are they trying to get when they're hacking into these baby monitors?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, and we'll just call out security cameras in general. It's just general spying. Now Phosphorus. We work primarily with large enterprises and government agencies.
Okay.
In that case, it's purely spying. I mean, they're capturing the audio and video from sometimes extremely secure areas, and they're piping that back. Now it's a massive amount of data, so they have algorithms that kind of grind through it, looking for the important bits. But think about it this way. I'm able to hack these XIoT devices remotely, and I can use them for spying. I can unlock doors because there's a lot of physical door locks now that are digitally controlled. I can shut
Yes.
down power. A lot of these systems are tuned into HVAC control systems, so I can shut down power. I can increase temperature, decrease temperature, which can cause a lot of problems, especially like in a data center where temperature is very critical, making things too hot. I can also use these devices to what we call a pivot attack, where I might have gotten into your camera or your printer or your voice over IP phone, but from there I want to attack your IT assets. I want to go after your critical servers and maybe even devices you have in the cloud. So they're actually attacking these devices to, and this is kind of a technical term, to maintain persistence and evade detection, which means I want to stay on this device as long as I can without you finding me. That's all it means, because no one's looking at these. And this is going to really be
Yeah.
interesting, I think. Uh, when we first started looking at how many IoT devices are in an enterprise, we didn't really know what the number was going to be. And what we found now, and this is after years and years of working with companies, there's about 3 to 5 per employee. So a company with just 10,000 employees has somewhere between 30 to 50,000 devices. And again, no one's managing those devices. They're not secured at all, and they're just as powerful as the desktops and laptops in your environment. That's a massive attack surface. Now, if the bad guys know it, cyber criminals know it, nation states know it, so they're starting to take advantage of it.
So how does one, people listening to this are probably going, oh my gosh, what do I do? But I need this stuff. Maybe I
Yeah.
built a new house. I got what's called a smart house. I'm screwed. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah. So they're not going away. So the idea of, well, I'm just going to pull all these things out of my house, it's just not tenable. So you have a wireless access point, probably in an internet router in your home. You've got a printer. You might have audio video equipment and thermostats and other things that are connected. Most people probably in the average home have somewhere between 20 to 100 different IoT devices. Everything from their water sprinkler to their door locks and doorbells and everything in between. So the first thing I tell folks is, look, you really got to kind of understand what you've got. Try to ascertain what devices that I have in my environment. Now, just like you update the software on your smartphone, you have a password on that smartphone. You need to have the same things applied to your IoT devices. Now, here's the big problem. Most of these devices not only ship with default passwords, which are very easy to discover in probably about 10 seconds if you Googled the brand and default password, and a lot of people don't change those passwords when they set up their device. So your printer password, your password on your HVAC system, your password for your wireless access point might be the same password that everybody has set as default, which means attackers can easily access those devices. So very simple, figure out what you've got, change the passwords on those devices. And then the next one, and I know this is a little bit of a pain, what we do as Phosphorus is we provide an enterprise solution to make this doable for people with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of IoT devices in the enterprise. But at home, you want to be able to track your devices and figure out, am I on the latest version of the firmware? Because if the firmware is old, that means it's going to have a lot of vulnerabilities. And the older it is, the more vulnerabilities it has, and the easier it is to exploit. So if you did go through the step of changing your password, that's fantastic. That will get rid of a big percent of attackers that are just very opportunistic. But the next phase is, if I'm on version 7 of the firmware and version 10 is the latest, boy, I probably better update those devices. Now, I know you have to kind of look it up. Okay, what printer do I have? What model number? I've got to find this. Then how do I update that? It's not an easy task. It's not as easy as the way you do it on your smartphone or even your laptop. I'll grant that. But it is important to go ahead and update these devices just like you would your traditional IT systems. Now, with that said, most people aren't going to do it. And the bad guys are counting on that, which is why these devices are, being taken advantage of. And if I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to get in, I'm not going to bang my head against all the IT infrastructure that organizations have put in place, firewalls and intrusion prevention and antivirus and this and that. Tens and tens of millions of dollars are being spent in businesses to secure those. I'm going to go after the IoT stuff because the IoT stuff is just as connected, just as powerful. I can hide there. I can attack IT assets from it, and no one's watching and no one's securing them. So it's an easy, easy backdoor.
I mean, it's so frightening. But yeah, everyone has these things, and they probably have more than they think.
And they're in every industry. If you think of, water treatment and power generation and oil and gas and batch and discrete manufacturing, robotic systems, etc. These are all XIoT devices. They all fall into this category. And some of these things are 20 plus years old. And you've got some specialized device that all it does is control how fast liquid is flowing down a pipe, right? Controls flow, increase the flow, decrease the flow. It's a very basic system, and it continues to work. So they depreciate it over decades, just like they do a turbine, for example. And they're just sitting there, and they're potentially vulnerable. And if they're exploited, in that case, you could cause actual physical harm. You could cause destruction, explosions, all sorts of horrific things when you're talking about the SCADA side of the house.
I mean, that's so crazy. So is there anything else they can do besides updating to the latest firmware and changing the passwords?
Yeah. So what we talk to organizations about sort of at that level, in the enterprise, the government, the industrial side, first, it's understanding what you've got. When we go into an organization, we say, how many XIoT devices do you think they have? We know that whatever number they give us, it's going to be off by about 40 to 60%. So if they say, Brian, I think we have 50,000, in the back of my mind, I'm saying, okay, so you probably have close to 100,000, because they go, oh, we forgot about the 6,000 door locks. Oh, we forgot about all the uninterrupted power supplies or the 20,000 cameras we have. We were actually working with one organization that had over 25,000 security cameras. And a lot of those cameras have been compromised, and they're being used to mine cryptocurrency. Again, because somebody said, hey, look, I got into one camera. Now I can get up to 25,000 of these cameras, and I'm going to upload some software that's going to allow me to mine crypto.
Wait,
how did they detect it? Yeah.
Back up. What crypto were they mining with these cameras?
Bitcoin, things of that nature. They're actually,
They were able to use a major enterprise's security cameras to mine Bitcoin?
Exactly.
How did they do that?
And that's why it's important to remember.
Wow.
These are computers. They're computers. They're just like your laptop. In some cases, they're even more powerful than a traditional laptop. So they have storage and memory and input and output and all those other capabilities. They just happen to be purpose built. So they attack the device. Actually, in this particular case, I'll walk you through it. They got in through a phishing attack, which most people are familiar with that. I get an email or something on social media, I click on it, my laptop gets infected. Once they got the laptop infected within this organization, they started looking for XIoT devices again, because they know they can hide there and they know nobody's watching. Once they found, oh, wow, they have brand X of this camera, sure enough, they had the default passwords. They got onto those devices. They uploaded their malicious software, which was used for mining crypto, and they spread it across all those cameras. Now, I'd love to say they detected it because they had a great incident response team and there was some really cool, snazzy software that detected. No, they detected it because their power bill went up substantially. So if you ever look at people that mine cryptocurrency, it sucks a lot of power. So when you turn 25,000 cameras into crypto miners, it has a dramatic and noticeable impact. And that's how they actually detected this. And there's actually been a few different examples of that type of thing happening.
Because I always thought if you mined Bitcoin, you had to get those big clunky miners, and you had to store them in a warehouse that was at a very low temperature because they were requiring so much energy and all this stuff. But apparently, you can turn anything into a miner.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You can turn anything into a miner, especially if you have a massive distributed
So
architecture.
these hackers, give them credit where credit's due.
Well, and a lot of the software to do this is now online and easily available. In fact, there was a tool that was invented or designed for the Russian FSB called Fronten. And it was designed for the FSB to go out and find XIoT devices, compromise those devices, and then control those devices to steal sensitive data or anything you want. You could use that to then force those devices to mine crypto, ransomware attacks, whatever. Now, unfortunately for the Russian FSB, a hacking group called Digital Revolution got wind of this, and they actually stole it from the Russian FSB and they released it to the world. So for quite a while, Fronten, this industrial grade military designed tool built for Russia for hacking XIoT, was out on the internet on all these various torrents, and anybody could download it. If you could speak Russian or read it at least, you can go ahead and leverage this tool pretty easily. Now, there's lots of tools out there like that. That just happens to be one that was built for a nation state. Now, you had asked me a little while ago, like what enterprises do. And I said, the first part of this is discovery. You've got to figure out what you've got. The second part of it is rotating the credentials. You don't want default passwords. About 50% of every device that we find has a default password. And if you look at the volume again, 10,000 people means 50,000 XIoT devices. That means 25,000 devices, little computers on your network, have a default password. You don't need to know how to hack anything. You just need to log in. On top of that, firmware. We talked about updating and patching the firmware. Well, most firmware, 26% is end of life. And the average age of firmware that we discover is about 6 years old. Your smartphone probably wouldn't even work if the operating system was 6 years old, let alone the applications that sit upon it. And now we're talking about enterprise systems that are controlling the most critical portions of supply chains and power generation and back-end enterprises. And another thing is they tend to be pretty promiscuous. And what I mean by XIoT devices being promiscuous is they want to be easy to connect to. And take a printer, for example, just a standard printer. It wants to be able to be plugged into wired Ethernet, wireless, have Bluetooth low energy, all these different ports and protocols for communication, web, SSH, FTP, TFTP, and the list goes on because they want to be easy to use. And that's okay from a usability perspective, but from a security perspective, there's all these little back doors, each port and protocol. So find the device, manage the credentials, manage the firmware, and then what we call harden the device, which simply means, look, if you only need to connect with 2 mechanisms, turn the other 10 mechanisms that you don't need off. And then finally, manage my certificates. So there's encryption certificates on almost every XIoT device, most modern XIoT devices. Often they're expired and they just haven't been kept up to date. Those basic things, and this is basic hygiene, this is things that we've been doing in the IT world since probably the mid-90s.
Yeah.
We haven't done any of this in XIoT. So I don't have some There's no whiz bang, plug in this box and do this thing. If somebody tries to sell you that, run as fast as you can. This is basic sort of care and feeding of your XIoT devices the way that you would for IT. Now,
So interesting.
I'll share a really, really interesting example with you. So the first sort of widespread XIoT attack that was known happened in 2016. It was called Mirai, and it was a botnet attack, which basically means I'm going to try to attack all these systems, and then I'm going to be able to control them, and then I'm going to use these devices to attack other people. Denial of service attacks, phishing campaigns, send spam, you name it. When you have an army of computers, there's a lot of things that you can do. So what these bad guys did was they used some common tools. There's a tool called Showdown. Use it a lot like a Google search, but essentially it says, tell me all of the printers that are connected online that are internet accessible, or voice over IP phones, or security cameras, because, okay, here's a list. And they, okay, further now, show me all the ones that are a brand Access, or HP, or Cisco, whatever brand I'm looking for. It says, okay, here you go. Now show me all the ones that are actually running Telnet, which is just a communication protocol. It says, okay, we've gone now from 5 million devices, now we've got it down to maybe 500,000 devices. And what they did was they started trying to log on to those cameras that were internet accessible with the specific brand over Telnet, and they knew that a great percentage of them would be default passwords. They were able to accumulate enough security cameras, and this is again back in 2016, enough security cameras that they had more bandwidth and more processing capability at that time because of the size of this botnet than Amazon and Google combined. That's based on security cameras. Now, here's the kicker. There's a lot of what's called white labeling and library sharing in the XIoT world, which means if you're building a printer and I'm building a phone, I might be able to use some of the code that you're using, and you might be able to use some of the code that I'm using. So we'll share libraries, and maybe we'll white label this driver from somebody else. So there's a lot of commonality. Well, that's great for getting a product to market quicker, but with some that sometimes comes vulnerabilities, default passwords, open ports. So people are sometimes shipping with communication protocols that are open with a default password. They didn't even test and realize it was there. So when Mirai came out in 2016 and they started focusing on cameras, what they found quickly is, hey, it's not just the cameras. There's a lot of audio video equipment and printers and other XIoT devices that have these vulnerabilities as well. So it expanded greatly past security cameras to be much more inclusive of a lot more XIoT devices just because they had the exact same issues. Now, today, we still find devices, and this is back from 2016, that are still vulnerable to Mirai because they still haven't been patched. There's been patches to fix this out since late 2016. But because people frequently don't patch these devices, they're still vulnerable. And this is the worst part. There's still devices out there today that are still infected with Mirai and still part of the Mirai botnet. And because my printer's still printing and my security camera's still doing that, and my voice over IP phone lets me do that, I'm not looking. I don't even pay attention. But my devices are part of a botnet that's being used to attack other people and do other malicious things. And that's kind of the sad part of XIoT. It's this invisible little sort of underlying part of cybersecurity that not a lot of attention has been paid to historically, although that's now changing over the last couple of years.
I mean, it's so crazy, and I'm sure people listening are like, "What? Oh my gosh, I didn't realize my whole home could be infected." And so this is good. This is educational. So working in this security, I want to know, what is one device you would never put in your home?
One device that I would never put in my home, boy,
You can list more than one. But
yeah.
like the top one, you're like, that is not going in my home ever.
I'll say this. I have some family members that have some medical devices that they use. And I don't want to say that I wouldn't want them to use those, but that's one device in particular. And I would say probably the most critical that you make sure is absolutely positively as secure as possible.
What
So
type of medical device are we talking about?
sometimes it could be something that controls a pacemaker. It could control insulin as well for certain individuals. There are things that are physically attached to you or inside you. They're often controlled through a smartphone app, and they can also be accessed remotely, usually by a medical professional to make small adjustments and tweaks. So it's essentially a computer that's on you or in you, that's connected to the internet. And
Hey,
you
that's
could imagine
frightening.
it's frightening in of itself. And there's wonderful medical gains to be made by having that. But boy, if you're going to have something like that, ask the right questions, make sure that what
Yeah.
you're putting on you or in you is secure. So those are the things I'd be most cautious of. The other one that I think is very, very simple is any kind of external security system. So digital door locks. There's biometrics digital door locks. Some have card readers. Sometimes you type in a code.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a separate code for to get your house cleaner to come in and this and that,
Yeah.
or your kids have different codes. So it's great. It's a great capability. We were doing a project for a bank once, and they had 6,400 digital door locks. We were able to lock and unlock any of those doors at will with nothing more than simply logging onto the main control server, which was very easy to access with the default password. We didn't have to exploit any vulnerabilities, and we could do things like unlock the front door, unlock the back door, unlock. It was quite scary actually. And this is a financial services organization. When we talk about all the business verticals, financial services is usually the tip of the spear as it relates to being security savvy, because they have to, because they're being attacked all the time. People
Sure.
attack financial services. So
Yeah.
they invest sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars every year into cybersecurity. And that's great. And it does a lot of good. But the locks themselves that are protecting the building were completely left vulnerable. So
Wow.
those are things I would pay a lot of attention to. So if it's on your body or in your body or protecting your home or business, those are the types of things I would pay attention to. And I'd also say this: the number one most hacked device type out there, by far, there isn't even a close second, are security cameras. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of them ship with malware pre-installed. A lot of them are used for spying, depending on what organization they're in. Sometimes they're just used to add to a botnet to attack other people, like we talked about with Mirai. But there's a lot of great use cases for those devices. They're very powerful. So the bad guys like to use them to do nefarious things. So those would be the ones that I would probably keep an eye on.
Okay, so if people have these, they should make sure that they immediately check the password or change the password and immediately make sure they have the latest firmware.
Yeah, and it's an easy thing. When you install it, some vendors now, when you get a new device and you install it, it makes you change the default password, which is great. But they don't always make you change it to what you might consider to be a good password, which is uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers, have it at least 15 characters. I like to say make a passphrase, not a password. That's hard to remember. Have some type of phrase. Uh, this is such an easy step for you to do. And if you do that, you're getting rid of a big part of attackers that are just being opportunistic. And again, like you just said, make sure it's on the latest version of the software. If you just do those things as a consumer, you're already miles ahead of probably what the neighbor is doing.
Yeah. I mean, like, all these technological advances have, made our lives so much easier, being able to unlock your door from work, turning on your AC, all these things, but obviously it opens up a whole slew of other things. And with the accessibility for cameras now and the size of them being so undetectable almost,
Yeah.
I don't how do you know if, like, let's say you have somebody that's redoing your bathroom, right? And you leave them there because you trust them. How do you know they're not like sticking cameras all over your house?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a
Yeah.
way to detect that, or do you have to call in the FBI and say, "Hey, I just want you to do a security sweep in my house"?
Yeah, there are actually
Frightening.
devices out there that people use. I've seen people use these actually when traveling internationally, and staying in a hotel, for example. It's sort of like that, like you've seen in TV shows where they're looking for bugs and things like that.
Right.
Not crawly bugs, but bugs,
Yeah.
and looking for video. A lot of it has to do with detecting lasers and infrared and different frequencies that are being processed by these devices. So certainly that's if you're in an area where that's a risk and you'd like to have that evaluated, you absolutely positively can do that.
What are
It's
those
probably,
to detect them?
I'm sorry, one more time.
What is the thing you can buy to detect bugs in cameras?
Actually, yeah. So if you go onto Amazon, you can actually look for like camera detection equipment and things of that nature. So there are consumer grade devices that will help you detect some of those.
Yeah, you would think every celebrity probably has those, especially when they're checking in hotels or do you know what I mean?
I can almost guarantee it. And also, high profile executives and things of that nature, people that might,
Anytime somebody
start a
comes into your
platform.
home too to do construction or clean or anything, it's like
Yeah.
you would want to because not only are they looking for information to obviously have a financial gain, but there's a lot of perverts out there.
For sure. And, another area to think of so we talked a little bit about personal healthcare devices are on you or in you, but also
Yeah.
when you're getting like an MRI, for example. So an MRI machine is a very big XIoT device, very big and very expensive, sometimes millions of dollars. Uh, those devices can suffer from the same issues as that printer or that voice over IP phone. It's a purpose-built device, that doesn't usually run endpoint security. And the problem with those is we actually were working with a healthcare provider where an MRI device was compromised and somebody wasn't using it to, do a phishing attack or DDoS. They're actually stealing the scan information, patient information from those devices and just were exfiltrating it. They were stealing it and warehousing it. Why? I don't know. I suppose they could use it for blackmailing somebody. If maybe there was an athlete that has an injury and they know they're not going to be able to play in the next game or something. I don't know. And I'm just guessing at the reasons why. Of course, I have no idea why. But they were stealing that information. It wasn't to attack that XIoT device just because of the device it was. It was actually to steal the sensitive information off of that device. When we look at pharmaceuticals as well, a lot of the information about how certain drugs are made and the chemicals and the temperature and the mixture and the type of ultraviolet light that's exposed to, and there's all these variables, that's not kept necessarily in some big database. Those are all in different parts of these XIoT devices and robotic arms and mixers and things
Wow.
like that. So by stealing that, they're stealing the intellectual property of how these drugs are made or how this chemical is produced. So that's something that we see as well as industrial espionage as being a part of this. And certainly, intellectual property theft seems to be the biggest driver behind XIoT attacks today. It's not attacking the XIoT for the sake of the XIoT device. It's using it again to maintain persistence and evade detection and to attack other IT assets. In fact, there was a recent case that
Wow.
we're working on where an organization had been compromised for almost 2 years. For 2 years, the bad guys were hiding out on printers and voice over IP phones and network switches, attacking IT assets, stealing sensitive data, compressing it, and sending it back out. That's it. But it was undetected because nobody was looking at these devices and it just kind of went under the radar. Now, I can
Wow.
guarantee you if it happened once, this is happening a lot with a lot of organizations. This organization was actually lucky enough to have detected it. But that's the new. And again, the cyber criminals know it, the nation state actors know it. So this is what they're going after. And I said this a little bit earlier on, but XIoT security today was like IT security in the 1990s. People didn't really have a good idea of what they had and password controls and patch management. It was all a little bit Wild West.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of growth since then. But now XIoT devices outnumber traditional desktop servers
Yeah.
and by a great number. I mean, we're talking billions and billions, and some numbers are actually in trillions of devices now for XIoT. And the attack surface is so big. And I'll just say this. In the 1990s, we had the very first official XIoT device, which was a toaster. It told you when your toast was done. It actually wasn't a very good toaster at that, but it said, oh, your toaster's done. I'm going to send an alert. Today, we have smart cities. So Dublin, Ireland is the first official IoT smart city where virtually everything is connected. We've got smart buildings and smart ships and smart everything else, but that's an entire smart city. So
Wow.
in about 25 years, we went from a toaster to an entire city, which just goes to tell you what will the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years bring in this, where everything is hyper connected, cross-analyzed, aggregated, correlated. You were talking about your smartwatch a little bit earlier where that's tracked. that's tracked and maybe tied to your vehicle, and you have a smart bottle, it tells you how hydrated you are and physically where you are. I mean, there's just so much correlation capability now that's out there, and it can be abused as well as being used for good.
I mean, yeah, it's frightening because people just think, oh, this is going to make my life easier, not realizing that they're actually opening themselves up to all these like crazy, crazy attacks. But I mean, I always had this thing, like the firmware or the cybersecurity for your laptop or your computer that
Yeah.
you would, upload it to make sure everything's safe. Um, I always thought that the companies that were creating this software were the ones actually creating the attacks to get you to update it.
Yeah.
That's my thinking.
Yeah. I've heard that in the
Could be
past.
right. I
And
could be wrong.
my argument is they don't even have to try to trace the attacks. Software is getting created at such a quick rate. And this is a little bit of a different conversation, but most programmers are incentivized to get a product out quickly with all the new features and buttons and flashy lights and things like that that the consumers want. Most people don't want to pay extra for security. So because that's not an incentive, things are pushed out more quickly without necessarily going through what we call a SDLC, a security development lifecycle. Now that happens, and a lot of organizations have very mature security development life cycles, like Microsoft, for example. 20 years ago, security for Microsoft was laughable. There was a lot of problems because they fell into that kind of hole of getting things out as quickly as possible, but not as secure.
Yeah.
Well, on the XIoT side, we talked about the white labeling, the shared libraries. I might, maybe I've invented this new smart bottle, and I'm a bottle manufacturer. I don't know anything about making it connected or putting it online or making it XIoT. I just know how to make a bottle. But people say, oh, they want an app that's going to feed into their iPhone and tell them, what temperature my water's at and how much I've drank, whatever it is I'm measuring. So I hire a contractor. That contractor comes in for a few weeks or a few months, and he turns my bottle into an XIoT bottle. Now I'm really happy, and I'm selling that to the public. But that person that came in, they weren't incentivized to make it secure. They wanted to get it out there fast with the features that I wanted, that I think my consumers are going to pay for. Now, a few months past, we found out, wow, this bottle actually has a really big vulnerability. And from that bottle, maybe attackers can get onto your laptop or your phone and do whatever the case might be. That's kind of what's happening in XIoT. But it's not just this bottle manufacturer, it's tens and tens of thousands of XIoT of people creating XIoT devices out there that are just in every facet of our lives, some very insecure, some a little bit more secure, but a lot of them fall into that problem. They
Wow.
default passwords, old firmware, no one's monitoring them, things of that nature. It's just the scale that's changing things now because we have much more of them than we did in the 90s when we looked at desktops and servers.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like you gotta always educate yourself. And the one thing that was being hacked, I think it's still the case, but the biggest hacking thing was people's Instagram accounts lately.
Mhm.
Have you seen that?
Yeah. So social media is a great way for people to attract other folks to, click on something or download something,
Yes.
especially if it comes from somebody that you know. So maybe you have a friend named Steve, and they attack Steve's, account, and then they send you, hey, you got to check out this link from this,
Yep.
vacation took. We see a lot of this with executives. They call it spear phishing, where they're not targeting everybody in the company, but just like C-level executives or high-level executives. And they'll say, okay, let me do a little bit of research on this person. Oh, their daughter plays soccer. And then they get a message and the email say, hey, I got a great photo of your daughter scoring a goal during the last soccer game. What parent's not going to click on that? Of course they're going to click on that. I would click on it, and I just told you the story. So you click on that, and that's a great way. Now, whether that comes through email or text messages these days, or social media, or any other mechanism, that's a great way to get in. But a lot of times it's the stuff we don't think about. Here's a great example. So there was a Las Vegas casino that has a massive, massive fish tank. It's kind of one that everyone goes to see when they go to Vegas. I won't call it the name of the casino, but they had one of these. And in that, they had a XIoT thermometer. And it was just a thermometer. It just measured the temperature of the water. It happened to be a smart thermometer, and it transmitted that information back so people would say, oh, we have to go fix something in the fish tank or everything's operating okay. Okay, that's what it does. So that thermometer was attacked. Somebody gained access to it. From that thermometer, they were able to pivot over to the organization's network. And then from that network, they got into the database that kept all the details and personal information for all their high rollers, all their whales that came in. So if you could imagine the type of information that they had in there, financial information, personal information, various proclivities, everything from what drink they like and everything else, all of that was stored in there and stolen because of a thermometer in a fish tank. So it could be something that innocuous. So that's why the details really matter. I mentioned before, you have to know what you've got. And probably 99.999% of the people in that casino, even that worked in IT or security, what have you, had no idea there was even the smart thermometer there, let alone that it was compromised and being used to access a critical database of the whales, right? So that's all it takes. Just takes that one little thing.
Crazy. So when a company hires Phosphorus,
yeah,
what do you guys do? Do you have like a certain software that you implement? Do you just go through and do a sweep of all the IoT devices? Like, how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so it's a really simple solution. We wanted to make this hyper easy for everybody. Most of us that started this company, we've been working in security for 25 plus years. So essentially, it's a piece of software that you install local on your network. You can install it on a laptop, desktop, whatever the case might be. It's very lightweight. First thing Phosphorus is going to do is it's going to allow you to evaluate and interrogate all the devices on your network. So it's basically a sniff through your entire environment, looking for devices, saying, okay, that's just a server, that's just a laptop, I don't care about that. Oh, this is a printer, this is a phone, this is a camera. It's going to say, okay, here's all the IT stuff that we're not really focusing on, but here's all the XIoT stuff. I say, okay, that's step one. Let's figure out what you've got. Then it allows, and this is the great part, because there's no other software out there that does this. It allows you then to go ahead and update and rotate the passwords on all those, regardless of what they are.
In one simple place.
Yeah, HP printer, access camera, HVAC systems. So now from one location, I can actually manage all of my credentials on all my different devices. And I might have thousands of different brands and devices out there. So we'll do that. The next thing it does, and this is my favorite feature actually, it can actually patch and manage the firmware on all those devices as well. And one of the biggest problems with these things is, okay, I've got an HP printer. I've got to look at the model number. I got to go find it. Okay, is this the right one? It could take me an hour or more just to find the right firmware to put on there, let alone how do I do it? So after I've discovered it and I'm managing the credentials, I can push the firmware. And you might say, you know what, just update all my printers today, or just all the devices in building A, or everything in North America. So you can be very detailed. So now I've updated my firmware. Now it's going to reinterrogate those devices every day to make sure that, does it still have a good password, or did somebody reset it? Because in most XIoT devices, if you have a paperclip, you can walk up behind them and hold that little black reset button, and all that security you've done, now you've gone from version 7 of the firmware back to version 4. From a really quick password,
it is easy
back to the default. And so now it will tell you, it'll say, hey, you have 100,000 XIoT devices, but based on the reinterrogation that's done every 24 hours, here's the 5 devices that you have to take a look at today because something changed and you didn't change it through Phosphorus. So that's that continuous monitoring bit. And there's other features like hardening to turn off things that you don't need, and certificate management and integration with other IT tools and that. But fundamentally, Phosphorus can communicate with all these XIoT devices safely and at scale and allow you to secure them. That's what we do.
This feels like the easiest product to sell ever.
I'll tell you this. So I've been fortunate enough to have built some really great security companies during my career. This is the first time that I've ever been able to tell my mother and father, who are baby boomers, what I do, and they actually understand it. Oh, okay, I know what you're doing. The other companies are like, well, I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what you're doing. But this, they actually get it. It just makes sense. And look,
I was going to say, I don't want to work for like a traditional company, but if you need a sales rep, I'll take it. Like I could sell the shit out of this thing.
It's just one of the, that's the great thing. We go in and we just show people how it works and go, look, it's
Yeah.
not going to make your kids better at basketball. It's not going to make your car faster. This is what it does. It helps you manage your XIoT devices, period. And they're like, wow, I don't have anything to do this today. I really need to do this. I really need to be able to remediate. Let's do it. So it's been growing very quickly. In fact, not just in the US, but Middle East, Asia, Europe. We just have a lot of growth with this because it's a big hole that just has to be addressed.
So what about, do you have a solution for everyday consumers, like for their homes?
It's something that we've been toying with. In fact, when we first started the company, we thought maybe that's where we would begin, is on the consumer side. But we pivoted and we said, let's focus on the enterprise side first. It's a little bit harder to solve. And then once we get that solved, we can kind of backpedal it, kind of slim the solution down and make it really simple for the home consumer. And what we'd like eventually to have is maybe it's an app on your mobile device that helps you discover everything. And then it's some kind of cloud-based service. And then based on what you've discovered, you can go ahead and manage the credentials and the firmware from one location without having to go hunt everything down and spend hours and hours and hours trying to figure out, where is this firmware, let alone how do I actually get it on this device? Because I will tell you this, we interact with millions and millions of different types of devices. Almost every single one has a different way it likes to communicate. Right.
Yeah.
And I tell people, if you think back to Star Wars with C-3PO, there's this famous scene where they say, oh, he speaks a million languages and he can speak the language of like water evaporators. That's kind of what Phosphorus is. It can speak printer and voice over IP phone and HVAC and switch. And that's what's unique about the solution. So from the consumer side, or the user side, it's very, very simple. But behind the curtains, it's all that complexity is kind of taken away. So you don't have to focus on that for those communication channels.
Well, this is great. So where can people find more information about the company?
Absolutely. So please visit phosphorus.io. That's our website. And you can also check us out on YouTube. We have a lot of educational videos, demos of how the solution actually works. And we're always happy to give people kind of a personalized walkthrough of what we do and how we do it. It's a very easy to understand, use, and maintain solution. So in the security world, it's quite refreshing because there's a lot of complexity in this space. We went the other direction. We want to try to make it easy. So check out phosphorus.io and we can go from there. Love to give you guys a demo.
Why did you go with .io versus .com? Is it because you're going more to the Web3?
Yeah, I just think .io is the new. It's kind of where things are moving to.
I also feel like when you hit .io, it's like, oh, this is a crypto-based Web3 blockchain company.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly. Yeah. No, it's definitely that's one reason. Another reason is, to be quite honest, most of the .coms have already been sucked up. Unless you want something very esoteric for your domain name, kind of going .io is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, it's cooler, it's hipper, it's more Web3,
It's one less letter to type, so that's cool.
Totally. Well, this has been great. And where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Yeah, so you can check me out on Twitter. I'm just at Brian Contos. Certainly LinkedIn, and through Phosphorus, again, you can find my information and our YouTube clips and things like that.
Well, perfect. Well, this has been great. This was very interesting, very eye-opening, very educational. So yeah, you guys keep those, check out those devices that you got in your home, because you just might be making a page for OnlyFans without even knowing it. Just kidding. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Next to Madison, and we will see you next time to find out who's next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms, and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.